What would you do if there were a technology where you could climb into a bed, be bathed in light, sound, and frequencies, drift off to sleep, and awaken renewed? Well, the most exciting part of the times we live in is that the genius of creation is offering us options we never dreamed possible just 1 or 2 decades ago. Barry McNew is the creator of the Life Vessel. Scientists, doctors, and clients alike are heralding it as the real deal, a device that allows the body's own intelligence to realign itself to a healthy pattern, physically and emotionally. And first off, Barry, I want to thank you so much for being here, because I know that you've been hiding from the media for a very long time. You've had many, many offers to go mainstream and otherwise with this technology, but for very good reason, you have kept everything very calm around this until all the tests could be brought in to bear, and in favor of your technology, no less. And so I want to welcome you back to the world of media.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here with you this afternoon.
Barry, first of all, I just want to say something. I think most of the people that I've interviewed on this show have this particular genius that they have accessed within themselves that not everybody finds. Mm-hmm. You, by the age of 4, had already found this genius in yourself speaking to you. And if you want to give just a quick idea of what happened, because I think it kind of sets up your life, really.
I was 4 years old and living in Kansas at the time on a farm. Was traveling from town back to the farm with my father and my sister, who was 3, and suddenly I was brought in awareness of an accident that was about to happen. It ended up being of us, and I got down on the floorboard of the old 49 Chevrolet pickup, trying to push on the brake to stop, with my dad saying, "What are you doing? Get away, get away." And the next thing we hit, and when I awoke to my sister bleeding to death and my dad and the other driver buried in wheat side by side. I ended up uncovering them to find death upon them and my sister in dire need of help, and left her to go find help. And at 4 years old, you don't really know that's what you're supposed to do, but for some reason the gift was there, and was able to do that, and ended up being at the home of the family of the man that was laying dead.
When you're 4 years old, wandering down the street to find help, you stumbled into the house where the wife of the other man who had died in the accident.
It was the family.
The family,
yes,
where the other men had, the other men who had died.
Exactly.
And what's amazing about this story, if you look at the headlines, that newspaper clipping, I mean, this was really quite a major accident.
Yeah, it really was.
Everyone should have died in that, including you. But you were unscathed.
Never had a scratch.
Yeah. So I bring that up because you were preserved for purpose,
Yeah.
Obviously. In my mind, there was a reason you had to live through that. And certainly understand something about the world and yourself in a different way.
Right. And I think that brought me to a level of, at 4, you try to understand trauma. Mm-hmm. And death is not very easy at 4. Mm-hmm. And back then they had nothing for anybody. I can remember crying in the afternoons and my mom saying, "Go to your room, take a nap, you'll feel better later."
That's how you handled your father's death.
That's how you handled it back then. So there's always been in the back of my mind the need for something for humanity to be able to well themselves, mm-hmm. whether it be from emotional trauma, physical trauma, or environmental. Mm-hmm. And as life moved forward, the Life Vessel came into creation.
Let's talk about that, because of course that question is usually number 1 and has to be, because people are going to want to know, where did this come from? Right. And like Einstein and many other people who have their genius working in concert with their conscious mind, mm-hmm. that's how it worked for you too.
That's
in
exactly.
a very special way. And if you can talk about it.
That's exactly how it came through. And a lot of people want to say, well, you're not educated for that, you're not a scientist, you're not the doctor. Well, had I been, this probably wouldn't have come to be, because it didn't fit physics, it didn't fit medicine at the time. And it had to be brought in a way that openness could come with it, and then the teaching of it. And it isn't always something that we know that greatness comes from. The greatest things out there came from people that weren't taught in the schools.
Yes, of course. I've read many
Self-gifting.
books on this, and you're talking about generally an intuitive insight, either while someone's sleeping or just zoning out, riding on a bus somewhere, sitting out in nature, and boom, it's there. The whole thing is there. And that includes the people who are considered some of the great geniuses of science. It didn't come through the protocols of what they had already learned. It came through flashes of intuition.
You're exactly right, and that's how this came to me. This was a gift, and I went with it. And today, it is what it is.
And it came in dream time?
Dream time, yeah.
And it came over a few nights in a row in great detail?
Yeah, it was about 3 or 4 nights of it come through. The first night was very frightening to me because a lot of things I didn't even understand that were wrapped around science, and then it's about, okay, now I have to understand the human body. And, you know, even though growing up on a farm and always thinking about veterinary medicine my whole young life, but never went into that, I was around it, so I knew life and death, and I'd seen it at a very young age. And so, you know, it opened, and I guess I was open to it, so I was able to move forward with it and understand what was being given to me.
Even though you didn't fully understand it,
Well,
you
I
could
didn't
understand
fully
how to
understand
create it.
Yeah,
But
exactly
you're
right.
talking, you're working in the world of quantum physics and actually beyond the quantum even. You're working in fields of intelligence.
Right. And the levels of connection and consciousness. So, you know, you have to be connected to your being in order to understand the consciousness.
Right,
So
right.
this kind of brought it all together to where the individual can do it on themselves.
Yes. Okay, now let's talk about what happened. I mean, you had to get out a toolbox, obviously, dust your tools off and start building this thing, which looks like it just looks like a wooden box, basically.
It looks like it, but simplicity is not always what
That's
it
right.
looks like.
From the outside,
Yeah.
it looks like a wooden box, but you had to
Yeah.
start figuring out how to engineer this thing and get light waves and frequency and vibration all into this. And let me say, I did one session last week in prep for this because I wanted to know what we're talking about here. And the only way to describe it, I mean, I had my own experience, as everyone does, inside the vehicle, but it was a slice of heaven. It was an amazing experience being in there.
When I was creating it and building it at the beginning, it was tedious and long because there was a lot of trial and error and repeat and tear down and rebuild, and times where this isn't for me. But I kept going and continued, and I actually had a working prototype before I ever had the patents done. So it was one where I had a prototype when I went to see the patent attorneys.
And you have a number of patents on it now?
I have a number of patents on it, U.S. patents now.
And it's also going to be licensed in other countries?
Right.
You have people flying in. I was talking to your cohort that runs the center here near Boulder.
Right.
She said there are people that fly in at all hours coming in from China to have a few sessions. And even late last night at 1:30 in the morning, a doctor came in and wanted to have a session in it to establish himself for his own facility. And we're looking at a little bit of this. What's happening on the inside? When you lie in it, the first thing you notice as you're in there is this area that's been cut out that has lights of varying different geometrical shapes, but also colors. So maybe just tell us what's at play.
We're looking at diffractured light and reflectory, and we're using the lights of the colors of the visible light so that when we change the intensity of the light and in the diffractured use of the reflectories, we can actually bring hues of color that the eye really wouldn't pick up normally. So these are that which are absorbed optically to the brain as well as to the skin, and so we're bringing that frequency in, and at the same time we're bringing sound frequency. And the key to the whole process is we're doing this in a resonant frequency.
Explain what that means.
Well,
People hear the
resonance
word
is a toning of or a energetic frequency of something that's known. Okay, and what we did with this unit was able to create that around a frequency, and what was given to me was C flat minor, which doesn't really exist in our culture of
It's
music.
not classically taught,
Yeah,
yes.
but when they did a lot of the studies on it, and they did everything about the wood and the airspace and the measurements and what have you, they came to find that by putting all that together, there were 3 chords that ended up being what would be called C flat minor.
There's another rub to this, too.
Yeah.
King Tut's tomb.
And they claimed that was the same tones that they were finding in the tomb of King Tut.
Isn't that interesting? Or coincidental?
Coincidental, maybe.
Well, let's talk about why that's not coincidental.
Well, I don't think it's coincidental because I think that's probably the eternal tone, maybe, that the body can, you have to go there where the body can go to that relaxed state. And what was unique in this was, what I found was the place where the body releases, let go, and resets is at a level below the level of consciousness, whether it be at an awake state or a sleep state. It was unique to the doctors to see that I could take the body and the brain waves to a 2 hertz frequency and still be wide awake.
Because not everybody that goes in this falls asleep. It's just so beautiful and relaxing.
Yeah.
You could tend to drift off and certainly just be in dreamy kinds of thoughts. So that is not considered to be possible.
Right.
To be in a 2 hertz range, which is low delta.
Mm-hmm.
That's deep sleep.
Right.
Now, is it fair to say that when most of us are sleeping at night, we're actually never really going to that depth for the most part? Are we mostly staying up in the 4 to 6 hertz range? Or?
Yeah, and not being a doctor and not understanding all of their world, but what I've been told, that's correct. So, we go in and out.
Yes.
The thing that's unique about this is that you may think you're awake or you may think you went to sleep, but people go in there and they'll be, for the hour, totally asleep. We can hear them snoring, whatever,
Right.
from the outside, and they'll wake. When you bring them out, they say, I don't think I slept at all.
It's kind of like being in hypnosis.
So it's losing that consciousness of what is right now and just being in the
Losing awareness of the physical world, really, and your physical reality.
Yeah.
But because we tend to repair. I mean, we repair at night when we're sleeping.
Body repairs.
That's when the body starts repairing. But what I'm hearing in this is that if you can take the person's frequencies lower than they can go in sleep time, like you say, you're taking to where ideally, in an ideal world, we would all be sleeping and resting at 2 hertz
Right.
and deep delta, but we're not. Our bodies are strung out. The interference from so many different things is there.
But if you can get the cellular aspect of it to be at that level, then internally the body can reset. Okay, so I could sit here and talk with you, but I could also take myself to that place and still reset and
now
recall.
that's something that has really only been demonstrated by monks, Tibetan monks that have been practicing meditation for 30 and 40 years. I mean, there have been a lot of brain mapping done on
Right.
some of these monks, and even they can't remain conscious at 2 hertz.
Right.
And yet your brain has been mapped, and you can be in that low hertz range
Wide
physically and mentally and wide awake at 2 hertz.
Right.
I mean, the tests have been done on you.
Yes.
So what does that mean? If you can manage to walk around while conscious in that state, does that mean your body is in some kind of coherence all the time?
What I named it was a synchronistic cellular coherency, to where I could get all the cells of the body to be performing in rhythm and in harmony. So I could come into a stress situation based on stress to the autonomic nervous system. I could instantly take myself to that calming and de-stress instantaneously at the same time.
You don't even have to go in the vessel anymore. You've
No.
done it enough that it's programmed in you. Okay, you just brought up the next thing I was going to talk about, the autonomic nervous system. That is really at the source of almost all chronic disease on one level or another. It seems to be we're stuck in the on or we're stuck in the off, and most of us are stuck in the on position, pedal with a rock on it, the accelerator with a rock on it. So let's talk about what this is doing, because it directly impacts the nervous system.
Well, I believe we're in what's called the age of speed, and we're 100 miles an hour, all of us at some level, and everything around us. Very difficult for us to stop, shut down, shut off, reset, rebalance. And with this allows for that to happen. the problem we get into, and it's becoming known, medical journals are writing about it, articles every day. Stress is probably going to be one of the number one diseases and disorders in our country.
It certainly is responsible for all the rest of them.
Yeah, so
pretty much.
you know, it's and we don't look at it a lot of times as, well, I'm stressed out, but stress can come from inflammation. Inflammation, I believe, is the start of all disease and disorder.
Right.
And so if we can get that out, and we can teach the body to let out as much as it takes in, then we can keep the body in a harmonistic state.
So when the person is going in there, this is based on the premise, you have a wonderful sign on your wall that says something to the effect of, the body knows no disease by name.
The body doesn't know disease by name.
It's just frequencies, right?
It never has, it never will. What the body does understand is an imbalance. So when you start putting names and categories in disorders and disease, now you've put an intent, and you've put a perception, and there's been studies saying that people end up with that may or may not have had it.
The mind is a very powerful force of creation.
Thing.
Yes.
Thought form creates a lot of things. Okay.
So you're going on the premise then that the body already knows how. This is a very intelligent system that knows how to heal itself.
Exactly, because it works on the imbalances in the body.
Mm-hmm.
And people will go in and they will find old injuries and stuff and be painful, and suddenly they clear right on through.
But a lot of people also go in and have emotional experiences before anything else. Something way out of the past pops up.
Well, if it's true that about 85 to 87% of the sickness and disease today, based on what's being wrote, is from emotional trauma, it's a big priority in our lives. Mm-hmm. And right now, the emotional trauma is creating that which has got everybody in chaos. And it's very difficult to come out of an emotional trauma by yourself.
Yes.
But it's very hard for someone else to bring you out of it too. Mm-hmm. But it's not impossible if you can do it within yourself.
Mm-hmm. Those traumas do tend to get trapped in there.
They do trap.
So I wanted to bring up something at this point. Normally I would bring that up later on, but you told me about this off camera, which I found very interesting, about the mind and the belief system. Mm-hmm. So basically, you don't need to buy into the technology, but you need to just show up. Just show up and have a somewhat clear mind and a genuine interest in feeling good again. Mm-hmm. And having your health or your vitality back. That's all you really need, is just a desire, right?
The desire to be responsible for your own health care.
Yes, and this is a big deal. I mean, we're on our own where healthcare is concerned, and we have Obamacare coming up. I feel like we're going to be even more on our own. So much is not in place for us that us and the generations that are younger and coming up, we need to find technologies and means of taking care of ourselves. This is critical. Right. Nonetheless, there are times when this may not work, so to speak. And you told me off camera about this woman who had a brain tumor. And the strength of identity with disease. This is a big one to bring up because I know a lot of people listening have either been through this or know people who've been through it. Just tell us that little story, if you would, please.
Well, it was where that was her identity.
She had a brain tumor.
Had the brain tumor. And as it would get, we could see it dissipating, it wasn't what she wanted. You know, and then there was times that we'll get them to where they can't even believe that the body can heal that itself. Right. Okay, and so we see all kinds of things that go on. But
this woman was very direct with you. It was starting to improve. It was turning the corner. Right. And she quit. She said, "Who am I without my brain tumor?"
She said, "I won't know who I am, and no one else will either, and I can't do this anymore."
Because her whole identity was wrapped up in being a woman with a brain tumor. Yeah. So there were some hidden benefits there on some emotional or mental or some kind of level. Yeah. And that's not uncommon for people who are sick.
No, it happens all the time. And you know, we're in a stage where we're either, a lot of people think they're entitled, and a lot of people think they're deserving, and yet they don't want to pay the price to be responsible. Right. And so with Life Vessel, it's a means by which you can be responsible, and you do take part in your wellness. never to take away from medicine because it's always going to be there. This is just another tool in the toolbox. It has greatness for the doctors, it has greatness for the people, and it works on such a fast timeline that it's just almost unbelievable sometimes what it's capable of doing.
And we're going to talk about some of that. And before we get to some of the case studies that are really kind of shocking, it falls over into the miraculous category, but again, you see that all the time. I want to talk about some of the tests that have been conducted and some of the devices that have been built, even by MIT. Boeing has been involved in some of this research. There's a lot of science behind what you're doing now. And let's talk about some of it. And not only that, there has been, and I'm just throwing it all out there to see what sticks on the wall, right? There's also been remote viewing by very elite members of the CIA, SRI and CIA remote viewing teams that normally are tasked with finding silos, nuclear silos in foreign lands and such. So they have to be good at what they do. I've met and interviewed some of these people for the last 30 years. These guys can see, and they've even remote viewed this technology.
Right.
This is not something that's just airy-fairy. You've just been under the radar.
Right. And you use that under the radar. Just I kept it slow so it could be correct, and I wanted the right people around it, and I wanted to bring it out at the right time. And I believe we're there. I think we have the need. I think society and humanity is looking for this, and I think the communities are looking for it. Whether it be the medical community, the educational world, science world, we're all needing help right now. And this has a means to not only help medicine, but it also has the means to help economically. And the world needs that as well.
Absolutely. Okay, let's get into some of the science, some of the testing that has been done, the various areas.
Yeah. We did full CDC panels, workups on it, blood work. Many years of that with doctors where we would do the befores and afters. I've done the scans from the MRIs to the SPECT scans, the PET scans, to the ultrasounds, to the thermograms.
Befores and afters?
Befores and afters. We've even done the molecular biochemistry work on the blood, befores and afters, which is
we're going to show
way
some
on
of that.
above that.
That's
yeah.
amazing.
And
EKGs.
everything was showed change. Everything was correct. I mean, they were seeing things that could only have happened because they were in the unit itself.
EEGs as well, right?
EEGs as well. We've done heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is now becoming a gold standard in the world of medicine. A lot of doctors are writing about it right now, and I'd been doing that since 2002. I was working with a group and that had the machine, doctors in Philadelphia. So we've seen a lot of the changes. And you have to remember, when you're working with energy in the human body, a lot of change is subtle. It's not always physical. It's not always noticeable. It can be metabolic. I mean, thyroids can change, hormones can change, a lot of things in the medical community, okay? But there's a lot of subtle change that happens as well, and that's based on the emotional aspects of it.
Let's talk about MIT, some technology you came about that started working well as a diagnostic tool. Let's talk about that.
It was a machine called ANSAR, and it was a group out of Philadelphia, and it was created by MIT. They did the software work for them, but in the creation of it, it was able to collect the raw data that actually showed the autonomic nervous system of the sympathetic, parasympathetic sides, and we were able to see and watch change as we were doing the life vessels of the before and after. 21 days later, 3-4 months later, we created baselines and watched it all the way through.
Now, you have left more than a few doctors with their jaws hanging down. You've left doctors even saying, I can't explain this, I don't know how it worked, but just don't make any claims about this ever, right?
Yeah. Well, and we try never to do that because we're not doctors.
Right.
I didn't need to be a doctor.
Right.
If I could take you back one step, and that's the body doesn't know disease by name, that's all I knew.
That's right.
That's all I needed to know.
And this is called a relaxation vessel?
Yeah, it's a relaxation device.
Yeah.
And So it wasn't about making claims.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see change, you know anecdotals that it's happening, okay? And when you do blood work and what have you, and the doctors see it, they know it's happening.
Well, and really, it's, in a sense, it's not a very fair process, the way in which some of them become involved with you, because they have patients that are long gone. They've given up on, there's nothing more they can do, so they feel like, hey, let's just toss him his way, because some of them actually were trying to discredit you, and giving you the toughest cases that are still breathing.
Right.
And can you tell us just about a couple of those cases? And then I want to get into little David's story, because it's such phenomenal to see what happened to that little boy. But let's talk about some hard luck cases where people were beyond stage 4 cancer and so forth.
Well, you know, we've had them from Williams syndromes down the gamut. You know, I started with the cerebral palsy kids because I knew that there's basically nothing. Okay, it's just they try to make them feel better and some force manipulation of movement in the body, and a lot of times that was very painful on them. And whatever. So I started with those, and the mothers would come and they would carpool up, and when I first started, and we'd line 8 of them up at a time, but we were suddenly starting to see protruding tongues dropping back in the mouth. They don't hardly see that with medicine. And we were seeing hands that had been rigid, locked up 15, 16 years. Suddenly a mother's sitting there crying because she's seeing the baby open, or the young child opening the hand by herself, by himself. So, you know, we knew what was the changes were happening.
Well, so with that group of mothers with cerebral palsy, with the kids with cerebral palsy, what kind of results were you seeing after they stuck with it for a while?
We saw results on every one of them. Now, does it mean they don't have CP? No. But does it mean they have a better quality of life at some level? Yes. It doesn't matter whether that's Parkinson's, cancers, Alzheimer's, ALS, whatever. You're not always going to, the cure is, it's not to say that this is the cure for everything, because it's not. But it will make a difference, and it will change the quality of life at some level.
Well, as this gets into a lot of interesting things, and you're not a woo-woo guy. I know that. You don't go there, but I do.
Go there.
And I look at it, and I'm thinking, interesting, because we all choose experience. You know, we choose our experience in life. When we come into this physical incarnation, in my way of thinking, there are no big surprises that the soul wasn't aware of before it signed up. And so if you sign up to have the experience of a body that has some kind of challenge for some growth purpose, or maybe even to teach others around you something magnificent about acceptance and love, that you can't, like you say, you can't get rid of the cerebral palsy, but you can make it much more livable, and in some cases almost as though it's reversed.
Right.
And there is always the choice of the soul, the higher aspect of a being, as in terms of how far they wish to take their own healing.
We're all granted and given change.
Yes.
It's whether we create it or not.
Yes.
And whether we allow it. And if we do, all things are possible.
Okay, now I want to, this is along that line, I want to talk about the man who came to you with beyond stage 4 cancer. He, in fact, they didn't even know if he would live through the trip to the clinic to do this. And what happened with him, because the soul still drives.
Soul drives.
Drives the vehicle.
I had got a call one day from a family in Utah, and they told me the story. And they'd heard about the Life Vessel, and they wanted to try and bring the gentleman down. I didn't know if he'd make it the trip or not. It was a 12-hour trip, but they got him down there. We started treatment on him and sessions, and I think I did about a month and a half, going on 2 months of them. They stayed in Phoenix. They didn't go back and forth. And he was on oxygen, a lot of the pain pills, he was on the morphines and what have you. The pain was tremendous. He was ending stage 4 is where they were.
They weren't trying to treat, so to speak,
they
anymore.
just were trying to do anything they could. And he was due back for the next go-round, and his wife called me, and the day that they were to be there, she says, I have some bad news for you. I said, what's that? She said, well, he wants the gentleman wants to go on home, and he's asked me to call the kids to the house.
Now, how was he doing at this point?
He was doing good. We had him, the doctors had got him way down off of the pain medication, and he was communicating, and he was, where he could actually be mobile and in right mind say and do things, which he wasn't when we got him. And she said, I just don't understand it. I want him to keep going. And I said, you should take him home. So she did. They called the family in. All the kids were able to come in. They spent time together of about a week. And it was a Sunday afternoon, she said, or Sunday morning, and he was reading the paper. One of the daughters was in the shower, and she was in the kitchen fixing breakfast, and he was at the table reading the paper, and she said he all of a sudden just looked over at her and smiled, and he said, it's time for me to go now. And that's how it ended. So you don't
shift your destiny.
If you're going, you're going, but it's how you go.
And the thing is, Barry, we have so much as a species now that we're up against. Mm-hmm. When you look at just the denigration of the food supply, to say nothing of GMOs, herbicides, pesticides, etc., eating bad food that's toxic, drinking toxic water, breathing toxic air, chemtrails, and whoever these beings are, these people are that perpetuate this onto humanity, know very well that we're becoming devitalized. So it's not as though you're taking away a person's soul-chosen path in terms of like this man with the cancer. It was his time to go. He chose to go. He was conscious. He worked things out with his family, and he went. He would have never had that opportunity had he not come to Life Vessel. The reality is we're up against a lot, and sometimes, I've thought this many times, where is some simple, beautiful, non-invasive technology that we can have access to help us get past the things that are being literally inflicted upon the human species from the outside?
Right. Well, and that's why I say, there's 3 things I believe take the body out of a balanced state. That's emotional trauma, physical trauma, and environmental.
Yes.
You can put 10,000 things under that, but it's in one of those 3 categories. And so it works in all areas if the body can put itself in the right
Resonance
place.
is resonance. Well, you've had a
resonance.
lot of high-profile scientists that have come through there. We don't even need to go through the list of names. You know a lot of these people. They've been
well-renowned people.
Well-renowned people. But one was kind of interesting because it was toward her end days. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross came in. You didn't know who she was. I need an appointment. Her people said, she must have an appointment now. And you're like, I don't know who she is, and I'm booked. I'm working 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
But you worked her in. And after she went through her session in the Life Vessel, just tell us what her response was to it.
Well, we got ready to get her out, and of course in those end days she was suffering with tremendous fibromyalgia. It was to where she could hardly even touch her body. It was excruciating. And she was able to start doing this and smile. And as we were getting her out of the Life Vessel, she looked at me and she said, young man, I've seen it all. I've done it all. But you have it. Now let's go have tea.
Isn't that what a validation? Well, you didn't know who she was exactly, but that was quite a validation.
When it comes from as you go on and you understand who they are, it has great meaning because she understood life and death very well. She understood the technologies and things that were out there around the world.
Yeah, she did.
And, for her to make comments based on her own physical being in there, it has great meaning to it.
Let's talk about, just for a moment before we go into some of the stories that I just love of what's happened, let's talk about the remote viewers that came on board. Let's talk about Jack, what was with him, and then just there's a whole page of some of the comments that they made during their remote viewing sessions. But give us an overview of Jack and what the remote viewers in general were saying, we're in consensus on.
Well, Jack came to me, and Jack Hauk, and Jack was very instrumental with a lot of things at high levels, I'll say it that way. And he was suffering from diabetes, neuropathy very bad, to the point where he did a little video of his own after we had done treatments on him, and in his video he says he believed he died in the parking lot before we brought him into the building. and he couldn't understand why we were putting him into a wood box in there while he wasn't at the hospital. But when he got out, he was able to actually, in one treatment, prior to that, he could hardly touch his hands together. He said it was just excruciating to where the tears would almost flow. He was able to actually clap his hands. He was able to,
in one session,
pick up his feet and touch the floor, whereas before he would just have to shuffle. So we watched that over many years, and during that time, Jack had a lot of influential people, and part of his was the remote viewing group. And they understood physics a lot different than a lot of people.
But they did not know the target, which they usually do not know the target. That's the whole point. They have to view without having any knowledge of what it is, so there's no preconceived notion.
Right. And they targeted it and wrote about it. So, and I think you have the story, or it's going to be shown the story from those gentlemen. But they were always excited because they knew, after watching with Jack, that if you can collectively bring someone to that conscious level or that place, that all things are possible, and they even believed they could experience greater in what they were doing than what they'd done in the past.
Because it does alter consciousness as well. And you had one scientist, a well-known man named Rustum Roy, who was there, and he had a profound breakthrough insight while he was in the chamber himself, and he has a lot of influence in the scientific community.
Dr. Roy was a great man.
Yes.
He's
died
gone
a few
now,
years
but,
ago, yes. Okay, I want to talk about little David, just because it's such a profound experience that his body went through. So tell us a little bit about how you first received him, and then we'll see some pictures as to how he progressed.
We had done sessions with a lady in Phoenix, and she had come upon David and his mother at some conference or something they had in Phoenix, and so she believed that maybe Life Vessel could do something for David. And David's mother was a single mother going to school at ASU, and at that time, no monies, and difficult to even be in school, let alone work with a child like David. And by the time he was 7 years old, and the time we got David, he'd already had 27 brain surgeries. And the medical community had said, take him home and enjoy him. It is what it is. There's nothing more we can do for you. And they were doing 1 or 2 or 3 seizures a week. He was on 5 seizure meds when we got him. He was at, and there's a video on it from the mother, but at 7 he was still in size 2 toddler clothes, and he weighed about 35, 40 pounds at the most.
And he was completely
He was contorted and twisted, didn't talk, eyes weren't controlled, facial structures, no teeth at 7 years old. And so the lady angeled her with a car, and we angeled her with the treatments of David, and we did it. And in 1 year, we got to the point to where you see David walk with a walker.
With a walker. Yeah. What a shining, beautiful, physically coherent looking being, other than the need of a walker. And that's all he was doing, was just this.
Yeah. And in 6 months, we actually, there's pictures of him I took. In 6 months, he had teeth in his mouth. And he had gained more weight in 6 months than he'd gained in the first 7 years of his life.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. That the body can do that given the opportunity. That our own intelligence can do that given the opportunity. You also did work with Lyme disease. This is a big one right now. It's one that medicine doesn't really know what to do with Lyme disease at this point. But what impressed me was I saw in one of your video presentations, you were showing the cells. You were showing the cellular structure of what was going on with Lyme disease, which of course is these clumpy,
red rouleau,
sticky, chains of cells all clumped together. And then you showed the cells after, right?
2 treatments, 18 hours later.
2 treatments, 18 hours. It looked like brand new fresh blood. All the cells were round and perfect and detached from one another. And I thought, really?
Yeah.
Did that really happen that way? And
the doctors were surprised to see it as well.
I suppose they were. I mean, I know some people who deal with live blood analysis and do various therapies, but usually it doesn't happen that fast, if at all. Yeah. Especially Lyme disease. That's a tough one.
And that was what we were seeing. I mean, this is it's whether we talk the language, we don't talk the language, but it's like at warp speed, okay? And the body, when it's in balanced state, it's at warp speed. It's signaling things throughout the entire body and to the cells and communicating, and the synapses are going on, and so it has to be firing in perfect order for things to function correctly. But it can send signals, like speed
faster
has no
than
time.
the speed of light. Exactly. Exactly. And we also, because of the environmental factors, there is sometimes when I know that when the technicians are in the room, they come in the room at the end of a session, the room can just smell horrific with the off-gassing in the body of metals, of urea, of all kinds of different things.
We actually get the detox coming out at cellular level.
Yeah, and I know I was talking to Gail, and she said that it's almost unbearable to be in the room sometimes when someone has really heavy toxicities. The whole room smells of it after just one session. Now that's a key. You're letting a lot of stuff loose in the body.
Right.
And so what's the antidote to that?
Well, the antidote is you got to drink a lot of water to help a couple things. When you're working with energy medicine, you have to keep the body hydrated, cells hydrated, but you also have to flush the body because we're dumping a lot of free radicals and what have you into the bloodstream. So we have to get it out. So we ask that they be able to intake somewhere close to a gallon of water in 24 hours during the time of treatments and 5 to 7 days afterward. And then if they start to get, and the only downside of the life vessel at all is if they get a little nauseated or a headache, it's they're not getting enough water.
Right.
So the intake has to be bumped up, and then it goes
right, and it
on.
flushes out sometimes electrolytes and all that. Let's talk about that. There was one fellow that came through, I believe his name is Ronald, right? Ronald came through. He had been exposed to depleted uranium in the military. Go-for syndrome. Everything, he thought he was okay, went in to have labs and found out everything was wrong. All
Liver
these things were,
down,
he was ready to start manifesting serious problems. And he came to Life Vessel, and we're going to take a clip of a video because he wanted to do a testimonial for Life Vessel because of his experience. So let's take a look at that.
First visit to the Life Vessel, I'm sure Gail will explain how that works for you, that I went through the initial process. I went through 4 treatments, 1-hour treatments, and following that first 4 treatments, I returned and had additional blood work done, probably 4 weeks later. They recommended 4 to 4.5 weeks later. And my doctor scratched his head, and all of these levels, my ALTs and ASTs, my ferritin levels, my bilirubin count, my hematocrit levels, all of that had either come down to within normal levels or just above normal levels, where before some were even close to double what they should have been as levels in the body. And I was quite pleased, of course, and he, I asked him too. I said, I understand that some people don't appreciate alternative treatments or how they may work. And I said, is there any way that this could be a placebo effect? Did I go into this very neutral, not really knowing if this was going to help or not, but with an open mind, hoping, of course, that it would shed some light on or relieve me of these health issues. And he said, to be honest, when you're dealing with this type of blood work, ferritin levels, things like that, your mind, of course, we don't know exactly what the mind can do, but, placebo effect can't control the levels of these, enzymes and these proteins and aminos in your body. So he said, I don't know what you're doing, but whatever it is, keep it up. So I returned to the Life Vessel a couple of years later for another treatment. Was still feeling well, but I would like to do at least a maintenance to stay on this. And that was probably in 2004 was my last.
Yeah, and that's and I bring this up for another reason entirely. You're talking depleted uranium, okay? The body somehow managed. What did it do with the uranium? How did it manage to release itself from the effects of it?
Again, it's based on the detox at a cellular level. So in his case, he was actually on a liver transplant list.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's when he first came to us. And within the first 30 days, his blood work took him out of that. And so the detox, it's very quick detox, but it's one that the body can handle because it's a natural detox. It's not like something that's being forced or outside product that's given to detox liver or what have you.
So with his story, what I recall is that after a number of years, he went back and had some blood work done. He was starting to get slightly elevated readings in some of the areas, just very slightly. But that was after a lot of years.
It
So
was 7 years.
that was 7 years later. So, and then he can just come in and have it tidied back up again. What are the lasting elements in terms of the effects of this? I mean, is it a lasting effect, or does it need boosts, or what?
You always need to help the body because there's always something that's going to take it out of that balanced state.
Yeah, we're just living.
You know, you get one cold
Right.
and you get over it, doesn't mean you're never going to get another one.
Right.
If you get a weakness in the immune system or you get a traumatization to the body, something can trigger the body to break down. And that's when we'll get a call from somebody we haven't seen in a year and they say, you know what, I need to get back in. I can feel it. It's all about the body going out of balance.
Yeah.
And that's when the body gets tested and either it gets through it or it gets diseased.
Right.
Okay?
So he had, you do them in clusters of, within 3 days they do 4 sessions and then can't
we
do
wait
any more.
21 to
Yeah.
25 days based on we know from blood work that the body's still doing changes during that period of time.
And is that what he had done? Just one
He did.
cluster of 4, or did he
He
do
did a
2
total
or-
of 9.
A total of 9.
Yeah.
And that set him for 7 years, got rid of the depleted uranium. Because, I read a lot of information that flows through the non-traditional channels, and there is a lot of information that's surfacing now through people that I have a great amount of respect for, that we are being exposed to much larger amounts of radiation than we had thought we were. Now, there are some things we can do to help chelate that out of the body, using algae and green things and so forth, but what I was thinking about is this seems like an ideal thing to help start the detox of some of the radiation that we've all been exposed to by now.
Right. That and the other guys that are coming home now, the PTSD guys.
Well, that is very sad.
That's a whole nother thing.
To send them over into an ungodly circumstance, to risk their lives and go under that daily stress and come back with absolutely nothing except a little counseling, it doesn't work. I mean, what have you used this with vets?
We have.
What
and had
are you
excellent
seeing?
success. We have several testimonials about it from the individuals themselves. But, again, it's about being able to release that cell memory, being able to process and not always have to go back into recognition of it, but to eliminate it. And that's the difference with the life vessel. If they can detox, reset, rebalance, then the body can come back into a flowing situation.
You've said that there are some hospitals that are starting to explore this, because you have a lot of MDs that have now either worked with you directly or have had clients come that they couldn't help any further. So you're having your validation from the world of medicine for those who aren't just flat being mean about the whole thing. But what about getting it more into an institutionalized setting, such as, I agree with you, it's like every military base that processes soldiers coming back should have 100 of them.
Yeah.
Just get these
Should
guys
be
in
on
there.
the front lines
They
when
should
they
be on
come
the
back
front
in the
lines.
evening.
Get rid of the uranium. They have that stuff on the warheads.
Just trauma. Just
and
let
the
go of the
trauma.
day's trauma.
Exactly.
Our safety departments where they can't take medication. Our police departments, our firemen, they can't be on all the medications that alter how they think and what they do.
Antidepressants and all that.
If they could just detox with this, just the emotional side, forget about everything else, just deal with stress, it will make a world of difference.
Well, that's the thing. People, when they come out of it, say they feel euphoric.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
I felt wonderfully, mildly euphoric, and it carried on.
No road rage on the way home.
No, gosh, no. I was flying. It felt great.
Yeah.
That's just the emotional level. And we're looking at, well, first of all, I just posted an article from a doctor who just before he died, made a confession to Der Spiegel magazine in Germany. He was an American. He was part of the team that trumped up a disease called ADHD, right? Said it never was. Mm-hmm. They just made it up, because once you can do that and get it into the proper manuals, right, for treatment, now you have a huge industry with something like, 50% or more of the kids on one kind, or well, certainly of all of us on some form of antidepressant or mood-altering drug. What about kids and what was called ADHD or autism?
We've seen a lot of improvement with the kids like that. Mm-hmm. We've done a lot of work with the kids. There's several testimonies from mothers that the children were failing in school, mm-hmm. or they were afraid of the kids, or they were on medication. And we would do the sessions on them, and suddenly within a month or two, the kids are on the A honor roll. Kids are back into
their natural genius.
where they can communicate with the family. They can sit down at the table, Even
autism.
And a lot of the autistic kids can interact. I've had some of the kids are back in a mainstream type schools, feeding themselves, taking care of themselves, but they still carry the label of autism. But huge changes, unbelievable changes. Tourette's was another big one.
Oh, Tourette's.
Yeah. And there's many stories of different ones that have come, and they're all unbelievable. I mean, there's just there was one that I always talk about is the family from Nashville, and Sam was 7 when I got him, and Tourette's so bad that he all the time you just wanted to take his head and go like this, so that you knew his brain wasn't going to fall out the other side. Mm-hmm. And he'd been everywhere, from Vanderbilt to every hospital out there, and they had tried everything they could, and there was really nothing working. And they brought him to me, and his mother came, Sharon, and we started doing the sessions on him, and we had done about 12 or 15 over a couple months period of time. And in the last one, I mean, from the beginning to getting close to the end, the Tourette's had slowed down, where he could sit in front of a computer and look at it without laying his head flat on the table. And then the last treatment, they were getting ready to leave, and I said, Sharon, let's do one more. And so we did. And I let her come in the room as we were getting ready to get Sam out. Well, when you open it up and you look in there and you see your child laying there and they're out, mothers sometimes bring tears to their eyes, and
because they're
it's
peaceful.
It's something they have to process. And Sam, when he came awake, conscious of it, that we were there, he looked over at his mother and he says, Mom, why are you crying? And she said, oh, Sam, it's okay. It's no problem. He said, yeah, but Mom, don't worry. She said, I'll be all right, Sam. She said, no, but I saw such and such. And it was a name, and I didn't know who that was. And then he said, and it's doing fine. And then I saw Grampy, and he's doing fine. He got out of the Life Vessel, went outside, started playing. Tourette's was over. Wow. I asked Sharon in the room afterward, I said, what was that all about? She said, when Sam was 4, the first name was his dog. He lost the dog. Right after that, he lost his grandpa that had raised him, and Tourette's started. Oh. When he came into recognition with it and the treatments, and to this day, Sam graduated high school, he's in college, played football.
Wow, what joy.
Not
just for the mothers, but for you.
What are those worth,
Oh yeah, what is that worth? And this is also being combined, I'm just tossing this out there, for example, what about stem cell therapy that is just now coming to fruition? How does this maybe augment,
well,
or do you
it
even
augments,
need it?
And I work with a doctor who is kind of leading out there in the world of the stem cells, and what's going to happen is that when the body's in a harmonious state and in a balanced state, the transplants work even greater. And we've seen that on some of the bone marrow transplants, to where we've done some and where they've been doing Life Vessel and never even as much as got an infection, let alone a rejection. It doesn't happen very often. There's always usually something that the body fights off. And so she is very excited about it, to try and integrate that into some of the new research that's getting ready to go on.
Right, and you have some other, Dr. Christine Horner is a big fan of your work. I heard
Yes.
an interview with her with Dr. Mercola, actually, talking about the life vessel, and she has great hope for it with breast cancer and many others. I mean, there are a lot of doctors on board with this, but why aren't we seeing it, or are there some in hospitals? You don't have that many
We don't
out
have
there.
them here. You know, you have to bring into our society and the world we live in, it's a slow process. Nothing's overnight. Even to bring a new medication, it's a long, drawn-out process. You want to do it right. You want to make no mistakes. You want to get everybody on board to where it's working for everyone, including the doctors, the medical community. And so, you know, we're trying to do it in a way where they become the ones that bring it. They're involved with us. And once we break that to where mainstream starts asking for it, then it'll get there.
Yes, I mean, when you just think of the burden they're under, too. I mean, it's not just the patient. The doctor being stressed out by HMOs to see clients every 7 minutes. To have a private practice is almost insane, simply because of the insurance one has to carry for malpractice. I mean, it seems to me that technologies like this could literally revive medical practice again and encourage people to go into that field that are feeling now so beaten up once they get out of medical school. How do you see that interfacing with the new wave of medicine and new doctors coming in?
It's going to enhance that. And, you know, they're now curriculums being taught in some of the major universities of the alternative sides of medicine. We didn't have that before. 10 years ago, it wasn't out there. It's now starting to become a part of what they're taught. So as that moves forward, it's going to get easier. And as you can take the burden of liability from a doctor, which I don't want their position at all.
No.
None of us would like for that, and I don't envy them a bit. But if they can do things that can speed up, and when they start medicine, their whole premise of it is to do no harm and do the best they can, the quickest they can, without the expense that they can. That's what they start with. But as it goes on, it can sometimes change from that, from outside pressures and forces and different parts of medicine. So anything they can do to enhance what they're doing, to get their patients in a better state of wellness without doing harm, only makes sense. And in today's world, we have to look at it. It's how we're going to survive where we're going in society. And we've got to correct the emotional parts that we live with. We got to correct the toxicity aspects of it. Physical, you know, we can take pain out of the body, but you're always going to need the doctors to set the bones and what have you.
Yeah, for trauma,
Okay?
absolutely.
And surgeries and different things. So
Now, they're using it in Korea?
we have them in
China?
Seoul, Korea.
And what about China? I
We're
know
not there yet.
Koreans are very much more advanced when it comes to understanding energy and the healing matrix.
Well, they believe they understand the innate ability the body has
Yes,
to well itself.
yes.
So they're very open to it. Eastern medicine's very open to it. We're talking with some doctors and groups in China right now, and working with some doctors in Germany. Germany's kind of a leading edge of some new aspects of medicine.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just so thrilled that you got your download, that you're putting it out there in the world. And actually, I really, I'm very grateful that you chose to start coming out with this now and joining us here today. I hope you feel safe. I hope you felt safe during the interview. And I just wish you the greatest, and I plan on going in for a set myself. Why not get optimized, right? Who knows what's going on under the skin?
And I thank you for the opportunity, and I believe the time is right.
Yes.
I believe what you all have here is an opportunity to bring it the right way, and I've waited for that. And if that combination is correct, it'll make sense to the people watching.
You can go to the website lifevesseloftherockies.com for further information as to accessing the life vessel for yourself or your loved ones. There are only a couple dozen that exist at this point, so you may have to travel, but it's well worth the time and money. Until next time, thank you for joining us here on Gaiam TV.